Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing with our series, Dumbfounding Definitions, Dizzying Distinctions, and Diabolical Doctrines, a series sorting through some of the jargon of philosophy. In this video we're going to be taking a look at what is feminism, political, philosophical, and methodological. So, the definition of feminism is subject to a certain degree of debate, as it's used to refer to political movements, philosophical positions, as well as academic methodologies. In this video, we're going to do our best to provide a bit of the range of definitions that exist out there, because this is a controversial topic, and many people have strong opinions about what feminism really means. We're broadly going to split the concept into political feminism, philosophical feminism, and methodological feminism. Each of these positions is then going to be further subdivided to highlight why there really is so much disagreement on this term, because even if two people are both talking about philosophical feminism, they might be talking about it in different ways or talking about it in terms of assent to different propositions. Okay? This is especially often difficult because the majority of people that consider themselves feminists probably fall into all of these categories and may accept all of the propositions related here. But with those edge cases and with really clearly defining the term, that's where it gets a little murky, and someone might be a methodological feminist but not a political feminist, for example. So first off, let's take a look at what I'm calling political feminism. So feminism is a political movement, and it's frequently described in terms of ways. There's a range of people that will debate whether or not that's a useful framework to use, but it's a common framework, and so we're going to use it here to help explain it. The first wave of feminism is often considered the women's suffrage movement in the early 1900s in Europe and North America. The second wave subsequently occurred in the 1960s and 70s. That was the movement for greater social equality for women in education and the workplace. So while the first wave was more around legal rights, the second wave was more around social rights and respect. And third wave feminism is in many ways a reaction to the previous two waves, which are claimed to have focused on advancement of white, straight, able-bodied, cis, neurotypical Christian women, and not focus on the needs of women with less power, or the ways that gender plays into intersectionality and intersectional power dynamics that exist across lines of race or religion or varying levels of ability. If someone identifies as a political feminist, they may mean that they are in support of a particular project of one of the waves. One might support first wave feminism due to a belief that everyone should have the rights to vote, but not support second wave feminism as they believe that the place of women is just in the home. This position is common in many developing countries where women have some political rights but lack the social freedom to step outside their role as a homemaker. So one can be a first-wave feminist without being a second-wave feminist, or a second-wave feminist without being a third-wave feminist. And there's certain levels of disagreement between those waves. So just because you are a feminist that's associated with the political side of feminism in terms of the movements to get more rights or respect, it doesn't necessarily follow that you fit exactly into one of these waves. You could also hold a position that was completely separate from these, but then it might not be identified with the movements themselves. It might be more identified with a philosophical version of the position, which is what we'll get into now. So there's a debate around what holding the philosophical position of feminism requires one to assent to. So frequently with other positions, there's one or two statements that you have to agree with or believe or assent to in order to hold a particular position. A utilitarian might believe that what is good for someone to do in a particular situation is that which maximizes utility or maximizes the good of possible outcomes. There's one clear statement or sentence, and there's shades of utilitarianism that'll disagree on exactly how that exists. But usually with philosophical positions, there's one or two clear tenets that you need to accept. With feminism, there's often two tenets that are put forward, and the disagreement around what it takes to be a feminist comes down to how many of these positions you need to accept and in what form. So The two claims are a moral and an empirical one. The moral claim is that men and women should be treated equally in the eyes of the law and society. And the empirical claim is something like women are treated worse than men by the law and society. So, some claim that belief in the first claim is sufficient to be a feminist. You will often see these things on the internet or in discussion of, oh, all you need to be a feminist is to believe that men and women should be treated equally. While others will claim that both are required in order to be a feminist. Not only do you have to believe that men and women should be treated equally, but you have to believe that currently women are not being treated as well as men by the law and society, and therefore we need to act on this. And one could easily imagine someone that assents to one claim but not the other. You could imagine someone that maybe for cultural or religious reasons believes that men and women have different roles in society and shouldn't be treated equally, and therefore accepts perhaps that women are worse off, but not that men and women deserve equal treatment. Conversely, one might believe that men and women should be treated the same, but affirm that this state already exists in the world. Others have contended that it's not the number of statements we need to assent to, but rather we need to change the content of those statements. Some of those might be found in third-wave feminists that said, well, we need to parse out exactly what you mean by the definition of woman. Maybe it's people who present as female. That's what we're really concerned with. Or something else, that those people are worse off in society than people that present in some way as male. On the other side, someone might claim that the second statement should be that in some contexts women are treated worse, while in other contexts men are treated worse, to address issues like the empirical claims that men make up over 90% of the prison population, over 60% of the homeless population in many countries, and receive 63% longer prison sentences, at least in the US, than women for the same crimes. So, in order to deal with some of these empirical realities, often the positions are changed to say, well, maybe sexism is what we're combating, and maybe sexism more adversely affects women, and especially on a worldwide context, there's a lot of evidence to support that, but there are also situations in which sexism very negatively affects men. So exactly how you frame that second statement is going to determine exactly what kind of philosophical feminism you're talking about. And a lot of the disagreement may come down to how exactly are you framing that second statement? Which is why you will see many people saying, oh, the first statement is all you need, trying to kind of give a big tent approach and fit everyone in no matter how you want to frame that second statement. But exactly what you believe about that second statement is going to matter a lot for what you encourage people to do. So, now we're going to move on to what I'm calling methodological feminism, which holds to a similar broad precepts of philosophical or political feminism generally, but doesn't necessarily have to. But rather, what is central to methodological feminism is that it uses those ideas as a critical lens on traditionally male-dominated areas of thought. These approaches are as varied as the disciplines of philosophy themselves. You can have feminist analytical philosophy, as well as feminist continental philosophy, as well as any other kind of normal philosophy that you have, or male-dominated philosophy that you have. You can have a feminist version of that that's there to kind of critique that discipline and bring the focus towards more on relationships, more on care, more on ideas of oppression, as well as more towards ideas of intersectionality. In some cases, methodological feminism adds to the literature and says this is something that hasn't been talked about but is actually an issue. In other cases, it's more critical of the literature and says that this is something that's problematic. The way that we're talking about it here, actually it's incorrect. So often they'll challenge the case of the universality of a particular philosophical claim, which they may claim is only generalizable to men and doesn't take into account various dimensions of oppression and intersectionality. One might be sympathetic, though, to one of the positions that is espoused by methodological feminism, such as relational autonomy or narrative accounts of personal identity, without either accepting philosophical feminism or identifying with political feminism. There are a lot of interesting results and fascinating positions that have come out of feminism as a methodological and philosophical movement, which are, while they are driven by the want for women to be an equal part of philosophy, they end up being divorced from that and often solve some of the problems which exist as philosophy when it's only framed in a male context. So those positions are out there. They may be called feminist philosophy, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily connected or require a belief in philosophical feminism or a connection with political feminism. Rather, they're often things that have come out of us saying that, well, maybe we can broaden our scopes on this idea, or maybe we need to change and take a critical lens to this position that was come up with by a bunch of men but doesn't actually apply to larger swaths of society. Whew! Where do you fall? Are you a political feminist, a philosophical feminist, a methodological feminist, all three? As a philosophical skeptic, I don't assent to any particular propositions or beliefs, but in terms of methodology, I'm all for the skeptical tactics of methodological feminism as they're going about and deconstructing many main positions of philosophy, which the skeptic would be busy doing anyway. So, hopefully that was a good sense of an introduction to some of these ideas and positions. In future videos, we'd love to do things on positions like relational autonomy or relational identity or narrative personal identity and all of those kinds of things. So keep your eyes out for those. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org and stay skeptical, everybody.